Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. We're on the front line of Nigeria's battle to control coronavirus, but there's another struggle, convincing the public the disease even exists. After days of violent protests in Ethiopia following the killing of a musician, the Minister for Democratization tells me the government is in control.
We are cracking down on those who are transgressing the law of the land. And this is, I think, the fundamental purpose of government.
Tanzania is opening up for business, but exporters are still struggling. We visit sesame seed farmers living through a bitter harvest.
Last year, the price at world market was so good that farmers here increased their production. But little did they know that a pandemic was coming and would destroy their prospects.
Also on the program, backing black-owned businesses. How the Black Lives Matter movement sparking support and investment around the world. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. Another grim statistic today. COVID-19 infections in Africa have passed 500,000, and there is concern as a growing number of countries are experiencing a sharp rise in cases. Nigeria is one of Africa's worst hit. The continent's most populous country has just under 30,000 confirmed cases and over 650 deaths. But despite a steady rise in cases, lockdown restrictions are being eased, raising concerns over a potential spike. At the same time, there's mistrust all over the country, with some people not believing the virus is real. The BBC has been given exclusive access to a hospital in Lagos where doctors and nurses are working on the front line of the pandemic. Yemisi Adegoke reports.
Wearing protective equipment in Nigeria's hot climate is an uncomfortable business. But coronavirus cases here are on the rise, and staff have to wear these uniforms for hours on end.
We're now on an isolation unit at the Lagos University Teaching Hospital. Anyone who tests positive for coronavirus is treated here.
Dr. Akase hasn't been home in 12 days.
Let me check your oxygen levels, eh?
This 75-year-old man collapsed during a routine procedure. Tests later confirmed he was infected. Dr. Akase is concerned the old man is still feeling weak.
I just feel powerless.
He's one of our severe ones that we're paying very, very close attention to.
Successive governments have been accused of underfunding healthcare. Ask doctors here and they'll tell you that COVID is putting strain on a system already stretched thin. But there's another factor adding pressure to the fight against the virus. Historical mistrust between Nigerians and the government means many people don't believe COVID exists.
This is the isolation center of Kano. Nobody is inside.
This video, claiming to show an empty isolation center that was meant to be treating COVID patients, went viral. The government labelled it misleading, but many Nigerians remain sceptical.
Isolation center, people are dancing, eating, there's no corona. I saw it on YouTube now.
It's real. But we have not seen anybody when they show you that coronavirus is real.
If corona is in Africa, in this vicinity, about 30 people are supposed to die to make me convinced.
No one that we spoke to was wearing a face covering or a mask or was adhering to social distancing. And as the numbers continue to increase, things like this are a big concern.
It's not just among street people. You have seen this among educated people, people who are well-traveled. And I think this will complicate efforts to curb this in our country to a large degree. Lift your head.
Inside the hospital, the impact of the virus on Dr. Akase and his patients is very real. This woman lost her sister to COVID, and now she and her nephews are infected. She has no idea when she'll be able to bury her sister.
My sister is the closest sister I have in Lagos. She's gone. I've not buried her yet. I don't know what there's hope for me. I don't know.
I'm so sorry.
Until now, Africa has been behind the curve, but that's changing, and countries here are bracing themselves for when this pandemic reaches its peak.
More from Yemisi now. She joins me from Lagos. And Yemisi, I'm struck by how many people don't believe in the existence of the coronavirus. How is the government trying to sensitize them?
So the government are obviously aware of this type of misinformation, and to counter it, they are releasing statistics on a daily basis about the number of infections, the number of deaths. The NCDC, the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, they send out text reminders. They try to sensitize people on how to socially distance and to remind people to wear masks. They have campaigns on TV. The NCDC, they give out regular interviews to local press. But some people do question whether or not this is really penetrating to the grassroots, because obviously this level of disbelief still persists.
And you've been in Nigeria since the beginning of the pandemic. Have you seen a shift in the consciousness of the people? Do more people now realize that it does exist?
I mean, I think that there are two camps. So there are people that don't believe the virus exists at all. And there are some people that believe the virus does exist, but that the numbers are being exaggerated. Some people think that this is a plot by the government to try to scam, to try to get some money from the World Health Organization and so on and so forth. And this sort of stems from this historical mistrust that some Nigerians have for government.
Okay. Yemisi Adegoke, live there from Lagos. Thank you very much. Well, we started the program with the development that there are now 500,000 cases across the continent. Another grim update is that South Africa now has the 14th highest number of COVID-19 infections globally. But the real concern is the virus's doubling rate. That is, the time taken for the total number of cases to double. And it's currently higher than all other countries ahead of South Africa. 192 deaths were reported over the last 24 hours, the highest daily increase so far. And over 10,000 new infections were recorded over the same period. Ethiopia's government says it believes there was some foreign influence in protests last week that led to the deaths of around 200 people. The unrest followed the murder of the pro-reform Oromo musician Hachalu Hundessa. The government has cracked down on dissidents and media houses, and a blanket internet shutdown is now in its 7th day. I spoke to the country's Minister for Democratization, Zadig Abraha. I asked him why the government is cracking down on those who don't seemingly agree with it.
The public is crying out for law and order, for stability, and we are taking measures against those who are violating, who are transgressing the law of the land. We are not cracking down on those who are disagreeing on our policy. We are cracking down on those who are transgressing the law of the land. And this is, I think, the fundamental purpose of government. If government is not out there to make sure that its law is respected, what is it for?
Given events in your country in the last week, over 200 people dead so far, multiple arrests, media houses being closed, we'll come to that in a moment. It seems your country is bursting at the seams and you are unable to do anything about it.
Not at all. We are in control. For a day or two, there was an escalation, and we were able to control the constellation of events. Now everything is calm in Addis, even throughout Oromia. These things happen. He was a very renowned artist who is dubbed as the soundtrack of the change that ousted TPLF. So it's normal that people reacted in that way, given the popularity and the immense influence the artist carries in the Oromo community. But it doesn't mean that we have lost control. We have taken measures against media houses that are inciting violent, inter-ethnic, inter-religious conflict. It is in the purpose of government to make sure that its laws are respected, and that's what we are doing. And if you can walk around Addis and in any part of Oromia, you can walk freely. Everything is calm and it's under control. So I don't think this situation enables one to say that we have lost control.
But, Mr. Minister, I find it a bit ironical that you don't seem to understand that cracking down on media houses means you're stopping the free flow of information to Ethiopians, and the fact that by doing that, you make a mockery of your own ministry, which is the Ministry for Democratization.
No, not at all. What we are doing, we have freed a lot of prisoners of conscience, prisoners of political prisoners. Our track record shows you that we have opened the gate in a way that mesmerizes anyone. That never happened in Ethiopia. Press freedom is respected here. Media houses are allowed to operate within the bounds of the law. Press freedom, freedom of expression is not an absolute right. These particular media houses are involved in inciting inter-ethnic conflict. We can't allow that to happen. We got to choose, we got to give priority to the lives of the people.
I think it goes further, Mr. Minister, than cracking down on just media houses. Like I said, it's more of a crackdown on the free flow of information to Ethiopians. For instance, your country is in the 7th day of an internet shutdown. You have just turned it back on so you can speak to us.
We are not cracking on the free flow of information. There is still in Ethiopia information accessible. When it comes to the internet, it has become a tool for hate speech, for to incite intercommunal conflict, interreligious conflict, interethnic conflict. We got to choose between free flow of information and the lives of our people. So we have given priority to the human life. There is an active homicide going on. People are being killed. We were supposed to control it. Through internet, hate was being propagated. And, if you see the life of a certain person living in the rural area, whose life is being endangered due to the hate being propagated by the internet, we got to choose. There is no exception, whether it is for LF, for media houses. When somebody transgresses the law, then we got to take measures.
There have been allegations that the current problems in Ethiopia might have something to do with your dispute with Egypt over the Grand Renaissance Dam that you are building. What's your government's view on this?
It is untimely to say so because, there is a negotiation going on between Egypt and Ethiopia. We don't want to jeopardize that. And we got to wait for the investigation process to be wrapped up so that we'll be in a position to say so. But we are sure that external forces are involved in this process.
That's Sadiq Abraha, the Ethiopian Minister for Democratization, speaking to me today. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. Zimbabwe's health minister has been sacked in connection with a $60 million procurement scandal. Obadiah Moyo was arrested last month and charged with improperly awarding contracts to a Swiss company for the supply of coronavirus testing kits, protective equipment and medicines. Supplies were sold at inflated prices, with face masks costing nearly $30 each. A Human Rights Watch report says 180 bodies have been found in a mass grave in northern Burkina Faso, where government forces are fighting a jihadist insurgency. It said there was evidence that they were victims of extrajudicial killings by the army. The men had been shot dead. Burkina Faso's defense minister suggested militant groups might be to blame. One of the world's largest shipping lines has announced a moratorium on the transport of any wood from the Gambia. It comes after a BBC Africa Eye investigation revealed vast quantities of protected West African rosewood was being trafficked through the country. After its own inquiry, CMA-CGM decided to halt its timber exports from the country until further notice. The authorities in the Gambia have previously denied any involvement in the smuggling. Tanzania is back in business. Well, almost. The economy within its borders is reopening as the authorities say the number of coronavirus cases is continuing to drop. But for agricultural businesses which depend on foreign markets for export, economic recovery is still far away. This is particularly true for sesame seed farmers in southern Tanzania, as Sami Awami reports.
There is plenty of harvest in these fields, but the selling price is disappointingly low. This has left many farmers in a dilemma. Do they take their produce to market or leave it here in the hope that the price improves? Last year, the price at world market was so good that farmers here increased their production. But literally they know that a pandemic was coming and will destroy their prospects. Abila Makalan is a 25-year-old father of two and the breadwinner of the family.
My income has been affected because most of us focused on growing sesame and no other crop. But now that price is low. It means I'll be hit by hunger. So coronavirus has really affected us. We don't have any money or food.
The region's agriculture cooperative says any prospect of price improvement depends on when China's market might open up again.
The majority of our sesame export goes to China, and because China has been hugely affected by COVID-19, the Chinese buyers haven't opened their market. As a result, neither the sesame nor the processed products have a market. That's why many local agents buy from farmers very closely to avoid making loss because of lack of market.
Tanzania is believed to be one of the world's top sesame producers. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, in 2016, Tanzania produced over 940,000 tons of sesame seeds. The majority of the exported seeds are used in the food industry, including on American burger buns and for Japanese sushi. But it's not just the export market which is feeling the impact, but also many parts of the region's local economy. Traders in this market say they are struggling.
Business during the season is not good. For some farmers, their crops were flooded, but others have sold their crops at a bad price.
In the coming season, the regional cooperative is concerned that farmers will abandon sesame and turn to other crops, like cassava, which may not be a key export crop, but it has relatively reliable local market value. Sami Awami, BBC News, in Lindi, southern Tanzania.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come on the program, we look at how the Black Lives Matter movement is sparking support and investment around the world. I'm Peter Okwoche. Welcome back. The mass protests across America and many countries around the world in the wake of George Floyd's death in Minneapolis gave a voice to the outrage felt at the police brutality and racial injustice targeting black communities. But from that also came a sense that it was time to address inequalities and encourage black entrepreneurs. Companies such as Google, Facebook, and Pepsi announced they will donate hundreds of millions of dollars to support black-owned business. On the 19th of June, the day commemorating the end of slavery in the US, Beyoncé released a directory of black-owned businesses. It's a huge market. The spending power of black consumers is worth $300 billion per year in the UK and $1.2 trillion annually in the US. And now black business owners are turning that support into profit. But for some, it's bittersweet. Lisa Marie Mischak reports.
Sunshine is the owner and founder of a store which specialises in selling black-produced wines and spirits. Over the last few weeks, she has seen a surge in new customers wanting to support black-owned companies, but she does have mixed feelings.
I do think it's definitely a bittersweet thing. It's unfortunate that this had to happen for people to support and buy black. But to be honest with you, we're here. So I think we have to make the most of it.
Black Lives Matter! Since widespread anti-racism protests began in the United States and spread across the globe, condemning police killings of black Americans and raising awareness of inequalities, people have been seeking out and targeting spending with black-owned businesses.
Social media has played a prominent role in galvanising many online who are showing their support for black communities in the US and the UK by choosing to buy from black-owned businesses. Here in the UK, the first Black Pound Day was held on the 27th of June, inspired by the Black Lives Matter protests to promote more people to spend with black-owned businesses.
Thousands of people have been liking and sharing information on black businesses online to increase awareness. One business that has felt the effects of this push and support is Uncle John's Bakery in North London, who have seen a rise in new customers.
Moving forward, I think the only way that it can be sustainable is if we continue it. We are responsible for our own growth, and I think it's important not to focus too much on everyone on the outside coming to help. We need to help from within, and then once we do that, we'll be able to sustain it moving forward.
Economist and writer Fadi-Kemi Abiru says new government policies that encourage black-owned businesses would make a greater impact than one-off days.
I think these policies need to be bottom-up as opposed to top-down, so listening to grassroots organisations that are already involved in this space, and in addition to that also talking to those who are most marginalised in society to understand what would really work for them and to suit their context.
The Black Lives Matter protests have made racial inequalities more visible, but it's still unclear if they'll help to generate lasting structural, social and economic change, with many hoping that it will be. Lisa Marie Mishtak, BBC News.
Well, let's get more on this story now. Joining me is Titi Adesonya, founder and creative director of Titi Adesa, a luxury footwear brand recently listed by Beyonce, no less, on a curated index of black-owned businesses. Thanks for joining us, Titi. What kind of long-term input would you like to see to help black businesses across the world?
Honestly, I think for me, the most important thing I would say has to be more so on representation across the board. Diversity is great, but I think the real differentiator for change starts from inclusion. And that's right up from, interns all the way up to the execs, making the decisions. That's obviously from the industry landscape. And I think from within as well, for us as Black-owned brands, Black owners, we need to obviously maintain the highest level of excellence that we already know and we already strive for. And that's for the generations ahead as well, not just for us.
And what effect do, events like the protest, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement, and even Juneteenth and the Black Pound Day, which took place 2 weeks ago, have on black entrepreneurs like yourself?
I mean, it's been fantastic, if I'm being honest. It's been a huge wave of support. Of course, the revolution itself that's happening is amazing, but we have to obviously acknowledge that the circumstances surrounding the revolution are very unfortunate. But in general, it's been an amazing support so far. As you mentioned, with Black Pound Day, us here in the UK, a lot of Black-owned brands benefited from it, just like mine as well. So overall, it's been the right movement, in my opinion, and I just hope that is one that is lasting, not so much a fleeting.
And Titi, very briefly, if you would, for you, what was it like being named by Beyonce, no less, on her curated list of black-owned businesses?
It was an incredible honor, to be honest, Peter. It was incredible. As a 10-month-old brand, I think it's amazing to be included with those amazing brands out there, and all I can do is just say thank you, and it's an honor. Thank you to her stylist as well, Zarina, who is the founder of Black Owned Everything, who did the linking. So I'm very grateful to them.
Okay, Titi Adesonya from Titi Adesa Designs. Thank you very much for speaking to us here on Focus on Africa, and we wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much.
And now, don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on social media. I'm at Okwoche. But for now, from me, Peter Okwoche, and the rest of the Focus on Africa team, thanks for watching. See you again very soon. Goodbye.